I'm Lauren Jacobson.
I'm Monica Hoffman, and we are the light trap coordinators for the Sentinels of Change project through the Hakai Institute.
We were volunteers last year, and then this year we took over managing it. And we're one of 20 light traps here in the Salish Sea in British Columbia. The Dungeness crab population has been dropping. And this is an attempt to start to get data points of the megalope or the larval stage of Dungeness crab, and to start collecting these various data points from the distribution area where Dungeness lives. So we're just one of many, and we're trying to collect data. For me, having grown up here, I used to go to Hernando and Savory all the time and just get tons of Dungeness. I mean, just tons. But that doesn't happen anymore. So it's kind of near and dear to see what's going on.
The trap is deployed with an LED light on a timer, and that goes off every night. And every other day, we collect the contents of the trap. And then we analyze the contents, we count to see if there's any megalope, any other species that are captured as part of the trap. And then Sentinels of Change provides us with a cell phone and an app. We record everything in the app, it gets uploaded to them, and they download that immediately. They look to see if we have any questions, and they're just processing all of this information all the time.
And, our light trap kind of collects all sorts of things. And so it's been really interesting to see what other creatures are thriving. Like last year we had a huge herring spawn in the bay, and our trap has attracted a fair amount of herring. And some of the things I have never seen here are salmonoids, and there was a fair amount of those on our dock as well. So that's very encouraging.
There is another project that's kind of being done in tandem with this but in association with DFO, and that's for the European green crab collection. So we were a trial project in September, and we collected water samples that were frozen, and then they were delivered to DFO in October, and they will analyze the contents to see if there's any European green crab DNA that we collected in the water. And we'll be doing that next year as well when we do the light project again starting in April.
We're both environmentalists, and again, when we saw what a precipitous decline it was in this area, it just made sense to do it. Plus, it's pretty easy for us just to walk outside and go to the dock and do it. It's part of giving back to the community as well.
Yeah, it's the right thing to do.
So my name is Autumn Barrett Morgan, and I'm one of the monitoring technicians on the Western Screech Owl monitoring project. So this past 2 winters, Sabina and I and some volunteers have gone out into the woods at night in February and March, sometimes slogging through snow, like knee deep, in search of the Western Screech Owl. As I've been learning about the Western Screech Owl, I'm so fascinated by them because they're very adapted to the West Coast with like salal understory, where they use salal to hunt. They're so light that they can actually perch on salal and be looking for different amphibians and voles and things. Because they are a federally listed species at risk, there is impetus to hopefully help the population grow and not continue to decline. We identified different areas of the island that we thought that they might be with the help of some of the ministry biologists and the Pacific Megascops Research Alliance, who have supported us in training us up on their protocol so that we can all be along the whole coast, be following the same monitoring protocol, and thus all of that data can be read and interpreted between every monitoring site. There's a couple different monitoring methods, and one of them is the call playback surveys. So that was us going out at night, and we had a Western Screech Owl male territorial breeding call that we'd play out into the speaker into the night. Each station was about 17 minutes long. And so we'd play the call, it would play for a minute, and we'd listen for 4 minutes, and then it would play for a minute, listen for, and one more time. And then Sabina and Dennis also went up on their boat and did boat transects in the north part of the island. And they observed Western Screech Owl near Bullock Bluff through sound, responding to the call. And they also heard a Western Screech Owl potentially from Reed Island. And it just because of the way that sound travels across water, they could hear it from another island. So that was really exciting because it tells us that there's at least one here, and hopefully it had a breeding pair. Another method of monitoring that we did was we were actually through the Habitat Stewardship Grant, we were able to acquire and purchase 10 autonomous recording units. We installed them and mounted them onto trees, and I put them on a schedule so that every night they would come on like an hour before sunset and up to an hour after sunrise. And they would record for 3 minutes and pause for 12, and did that all night, every night for pretty much 6 weeks. And we also got some autonomous recording units, 3 for Reed Island, 3 for Morel, and 3 for Sonora. So we have volunteers out there also installing them out there. And the Pacific Megascops Research Alliance and the ministry have also, we've sent all the SD cards into them, so they will interpret all that data for us. Then we went on to build what the Western Screech Owl boxes. We had a big workshop, so we had, I think it was like 12 people came, and we stitched them all together, and now they're ready to go and get up into the forest. We have 16 boxes for Cortes, and then Morel, Sonora, and Reed each have 3. The next stage is for Alex Bernier and I are going to go and mount them on trees in various aspects of the island. And we're looking at also maybe installing some of the autonomous recording units beside them as well. The great things about the autonomous recording units is they're passive acoustics, so we can also be like observing so many other species.
I'm Alex Bernier, and I'm a park ranger for Hakai, taking care of Qayyɩxw Park and beach access and other trails, Siskin Lane.
I'm Sam Gibb, and I've taken over the job of maintaining the trails in Welltown Commons Park and also in Carrington Bay Park. Yeah, this spring I got wind that there was going to be a job opening up when Ryan retired from his position, and somebody asked me if I thought I wanted to do the job of maintaining the trails, and I thought, I could do that.
Working with Ryan was really awesome. Yeah, he's done awesome work over the years for the parks. It was just mostly time for him to move on with his own business and focusing on that.
In the springtime, it's trimming back all the vegetation that grows in over the winter and in the spring, and taking care of any small fallen trees and stuff like that are blocking the trails, and taking care of drainage issues when they pop up, and keeping the trails safe. And then in the summer, it's just checking in on the parks mostly, I think, just making sure no trees fall down, everything is still good. Doing fire checks in the summer too when it's fire season, making sure there's nothing going on.
Other maintenance that adds on is like maintaining the boardwalks and footbridge, and then maintaining the signs, maps, the outhouse at Carrington. The main projects that we done, part of it was Moon Road beach access. We put in new boardwalks over there, and there's still a little section to go in. And then there's also Whales Rest by the ferry there, and put in a bunch more boardwalks there, and also laid some more gravel. Well, I do have quite a few. I mean, the Cedar Ridge and the Qayyɩxw Park is one of my kind of favorite, but then there's also like the old growth section in the Qayyɩxw Park as well, where the old survivor fir is, and that whole rock face on that side. The swim rock loop. I mean, I really like the whole park in general, but those are the main section of it that I really enjoy.
For me, discovering Whaletown Commons has been so much fun, because before taking on the job of maintaining the trails there, I'd never actually been to that park, and exploring and getting to know it. It's just a wonderful park with a beautiful forest and so many little offshoot trails and entrances and exits, and little bits of nature in between that I'm still getting to know.
Well, my name's Christine Robinson, and
Cease Robinson.
and we have been coordinating the Streamkeeper effort under Hakai for probably over 12 years now.
The folks over at Tla'amin have been wonderful, and they partner with Klahoose and with ourselves to bring in, we've been bringing in 50, 60,000 eggs each year. So,
Yeah, so there really is an annual rhythm that has been established, and as Cease said, we've had the chum eggs come usually mid-December, and they're dispersed, and as they were this year, they were dispersed between Basil Creek and Squirrel Cove, the Whaletown Creek, and then the Klahoose hatchery.
the box in Whaletown Creek does well. Whaletown Creek is less prone to flooding and silting.
The last 2 winters we've had really extreme rain and flooding events happen in Basil Creek. And we got a call from a neighbor saying, hey, something's very wrong here. And so the eggs that went into the incubation box in Basil Creek were pushed, the box was pushed out of the water, turned upside down. We initiated a rescue operation, and this is the tenacity of these eggs. They were out of the water for over 32 hours, and they were turned upside down and smothered in sand, and yet there was a very high survival rate of those eggs. When we took them to the hatchery, there was a trough available, and so they were raised in parallel with the eggs that originally went to the hatchery. In terms of annual events, it's the fry release that happens from the hatchery and then from the Whaletown Creek, and so both of those were very successful. This is supported by DFO, so fisheries bring their truck over, and the ability to transfer, the thousands of fry at that point into tanks that are then driven down to the creek and released there. And the Whaletown Creek, it's been a beautiful tradition every spring that the neighbors with children, there are about 4 or 5 families that come and join us on the banks, and they get to cup the little fry out into the creek and ooh and ah and point at them. And then the school, those eggs come from the Quinsam hatchery, so they're coho, and they're typically about 100 eggs that come, and the 2 younger classes watch them in their stages from I'd egg to A11 to fry, and then they were released into Hansen Creek in April as well. So 3 fry releases in the month of April, which is when they would typically be swimming up if they had been, in the wild.
The other thing that takes a lot of our attention is tallying the salmon return, the spawner return. This year and last, that's been a pretty easy job, sadly, because there's not much coming back. Basil Creek might have had 15 or 20 fish. We only know of 2 fish in Whaletown Creek. It may come down to the problem with the eelgrass, and it could also be the sea lice thing. So given that some of the fish farms have been taken out of the way, and given that it's a 4-year cycle for chum salmon, the farms have been out now for 2 years. Maybe 2 years from now, we're going to find that the chum return spikes.
At the end of September, we had a pink run show. The last time we had pink salmon come was 2015, so they don't typically come via Cortes. But on years where the pink numbers are high, then they stray and they look for other creeks that they wouldn't typically go into. And again, there's been some suggestion that because the pinks are on a 2-year cycle, and it was 2 years ago that the fish farms in the Discovery Islands were pulled, that in fact the healthy pink runs this year that we're seeing were attributable to the fact that they were having to deal with the fish farms and the sea lice. So that ties into what Cece is saying about the chum. But typically on the coast here, the Campbell and the Quinsam had low runs, and we're still waiting to hear numbers from the Powell River area and the Quadra. But what we're seeing on Cortes is not unique. It's unfortunately more widespread.
We do know that the salmon returned to the Tla'amin hatchery this fall was strong enough that they will be able to get us some eggs. We don't have a number, but we will get some.
For any of those people who love walking the creeks and have an interest in fish and just being out there monitoring things, we are always looking for boots on the ground.
They're beautiful little critters, and it's a beautiful world out there that you get into if you put on your boots and go for a walk.
The wetland's about 2 years old now, so it's still in its really early establishing phases, but as each season goes on, it's been really exciting to observe the plant life that's naturally regenerating, and the plants that we had as a group of volunteers, they're really starting to thrive and grow taller than I am now. And just the wildlife activity has been just very consistent. I've got some really great footage on some of the wildlife cameras of the great blue heron, and we've observed muskrat activity, and just so many different duck species, and on and on. The most exciting piece is actually observing it functioning as an ecosystem. It is spreading water out, slowing it down, becoming habitat and breeding and foraging grounds for wildlife and species at risk. And through that amount of sediment that's coming into the wetland, due to water being spread out and slowing down, this is reducing the amount going into the lake and thus the amount of nutrients going into the lake. And it's been very cool to observe some of the natural regeneration of plants that have come in because, for instance, cattails, we didn't plant any because we know that they are really strong and vigorous and they would come in on their own. And now there's a beautiful patch of cattails that have taken root. And those, specifically cattails, uptake phosphorus, which is one of the nutrients that we are trying to mitigate from going into the lake. So kind of starting to see the progress of an ecological restoration project is we just do as much but as little as we can, and then just seeing the land kind of heal itself and doing what it needs and just doing our best to continue supporting that. Due to it being a hydrological waterway, there are still the water authorizations permit. We are required to do monitoring on the revegetation for the next 5 years and also on the hydrology, just monitoring to make sure if there is any erosion to be taking care of it right away. And so those are two really important parts of the project that we are legally bound to continue. We've observed that there is some minor erosion still happening in the inlet, and some of our most successful adaptive management of that has been actually just to transplant some of the rushes, the juncus species that are already on site, and stomp them in. Great volunteer work parties with some of the Adventures in Leadership and Kids in Action. We came up with this idea to stomp in the rooting sedges and rushes and then stick live stakes into them. And it's really taking care of a lot of the erosion that was starting to occur on the outside bend. And the inlet itself is now really starting to look naturalized. Another thing that we're also monitoring just for our sake as well is just the amount of sedimentation that's occurring in the wetland, because that is a concern. That's why the wetland project occurred in the first place, due to the erosion that was happening upstream and heading into the lake. So just monitoring the size of Sediment Island and any of the siltation that's happening into the wetland. We've inserted some monitoring wells and just ongoing measuring those to make sure it's not filling in too quickly. For the revegetation monitoring, we have to prove over the next 5 years that we have at least 80% success rate of native plants. And this year, due to the natural seeding that's coming from upstream or from the trees above, we have 234% success rate. And some of the plants are quite small, but they will continue to grow and be strong. You can tell by their vigor, even at their early young stages, that they're doing well. Since March, it's now funded through different sources. It's not funded through the ECCC any longer. So it's mostly through local donors, and we're still ongoing looking for funding because there is still requirements for ongoing monitoring for the project.